Governor Jared Polis recently claimed that Colorado is not a sanctuary state in any way, shape, or form. Here's why he's wrong. In 2019, 2021, and 2023, the legislature passed and Governor Polis signed a series of 3 immigration-related bills that put Colorado into the category of a sanctuary state. In fact, the nonpartisan Center for Immigration Studies and the Lutheran Refugee and Immigration Services both declare that Colorado is indeed a sanctuary state. Here's what those 3 laws did. In 2019, the state banned all local law enforcement across the state from cooperating with federal detainer requests. These detainer requests allow local law enforcement to cooperate and put an illegal immigrant who's committed crimes in their jail while federal authorities make their way to that jail to then detain and deport the person on their own. In 2021, the state legislature and Governor Polis went even further by passing a law that banned state agencies from turning over any data whatsoever that is not public to ICE. But they also extended this to local law enforcement agencies. In order for a local law enforcement agency to get access to state databases, including Colorado Drives, a database that's essential for catching and arresting criminals, the state required that these local law enforcement agencies had to sign an agreement every single year that they wouldn't pass any of this information on to ICE, or they would be banned from accessing the database that local law enforcement needs to keep our communities safe. I've personally talked to law enforcement on the ground who say that this law greatly interfered with their ability to catch and detain criminals and keep our communities safe. We can see proof of this in Colorado's continually rising crime rates. In 2023, the legislature and Governor Polis took it even further by banning local law enforcement and jails from entering into or renewing any contract with ICE or federal agencies to detain illegal immigrants who've committed crimes in their jails. As one example, this cost Teller County over $1 million a year in revenue that they were making by working with federal agencies to detain these dangerous criminals on their way to deportation with federal agencies. We can see that despite Governor Polis's claims and preferences, Colorado is clearly, on the books, in the laws, a sanctuary state. You can see, if you pay attention to his exact wording, that he's saying Colorado can cooperate with federal warrants. Well, federal warrants are very different than federal detainers. Detainers are much more common. This is often what ICE and the Department of Homeland Security issue when they need the cooperation of local or state law enforcement to detain a person, a criminal, for a while they then come on their way to take charge of them themselves and finish the deportation. A warrant comes from a federal judge and is very rarely issued in these cases. So Governor Polis is carefully choosing his words because he knows that state law, in fact, bans local and state law enforcement from cooperating with a much more common detainers. One exception to the ban on working with federal agencies to detain and deport illegal immigrants who are committing crimes is when there's a joint task force with federal agencies, for example, to catch gang members, like the Tren de Agua Venezuelan gang that's here in Colorado, or joint task force drug busts, or human trafficking rings. There is an exception in Colorado law where local and state law enforcement may work with federal agencies and authorities to catch those criminals only. And in fact, we saw just such a bust happen over the weekend when the DEA cooperated with local and state authorities to catch 50 members of that Venezuelan gang present here in Colorado. Interesting, of course, that this only happened once the Trump administration took over and insisted that these criminals needed to be detained and deported out of our state. It's very clear that Governor Polis doesn't like the laws here in Colorado and wishes he could cooperate more with federal authorities. But the law is clear. There's no wiggle room in Colorado to actually cooperate when we're talking about murderers, rapists, armed robbers, or a host of other violent criminals and repeat felons. The law does not give room for local law enforcement or state agencies to cooperate with the Department of Homeland Security in these dangerous cases. It's clear that Colorado needs to reverse its sanctuary state status if it actually wants to keep our citizens safe.